The philosopher Boethius, whose full name was Anicius Manlius Severinus Boethius, but we're just going to call him Boethius because honestly you probably forgot his full name by now. So Boethius was born in Rome in the year 480, just at the time when the Roman Empire was so old that it could use a hip replacement. Eventually he became a learned man by the year 507, with a fondness for Plato, Aristotle, and all things Greek. He ended up being famous for basically being a translator of all things Greek and the more mainstream Latin, a clear sign that the Romans really knew which people to deserve to become famous. I'm looking at you, YouTube. 3 years later, he became consul, which was like co-vice president at the time, subordinate only to the emperor named Theodoric the Goth. Not that kind of Goth, an Ostrogoth. Moving on. Boethius used the logic of Aristotle to help solve the infighting that was running rampant in all of Christianity at the time. It was basically ancient Roman party politics with no crap candidates to poorly represent anyone's views. After all that jazz about trying to straighten out the rather confusing and mind-numbingly theological aspects of Christianity, our tolerant emperor buddy Theo didn't seem to like him anymore, and so Boethius was thrown into prison. There, with no other way to express his distress, as Tumblr hadn't been invented yet, he ended up writing his magnum opus, The Consolation of Philosophy. It consisted of an appearance of philosophy appearing to Boethius as a beautiful woman. After lamenting endlessly, Boethius was consoled by Lady Philosophy, as he told him that he was way too attached to the world and earthly things. She then begins her treatment by showing that anything given by fortune will be taken away by fortune, and Boethius was lucky enough that he ended up in prison because he was a patrician. This all makes sense because he was born upper class. Basically, patrician was rich, noble, and hated by hippies everywhere, and that was the only reason that he became second only to the king anyway. So, till dear, the good fortune giveth, and the good fortune taketh away. So stop being a whiny baby! It's only prison and possibly horrendous execution. Right then, the next area of topic that Boethius and philosophy is that of earthly goods. Surprise, surprise, materials can't buy happiness, or even be happiness. Oh, how we are strolling through the hills of intellectual innovation there. The saddest part is that he made this realization in the 500s AD, while he was on the verge of death, and we in the modern world 1,500 years later still need to get this crap through our thick-ass skulls. If there was one thing interesting about this, Boethius used this eternal hole that everyone seems to have as a proof that God exists. The basics go like this. People have a desire for perfect happiness. Wealth and power can't provide, because the former requires losing some just to keep it, and the latter requires people that don't have it in the first place. And having either is so stressful that attaining happiness through these things is either impossible or just not worth the hassle. Therefore, because people desire greater things than wealth or power, a standard of perfect happiness must exist, and that, my friends, is God. Another point of note that Boethius brought up is that evil seems to be lacking in the substance department, the reason being that all men seek a supreme good, read, God, and so anyone who tries to stop these people with their own wickedly ways is going to fail simply because the good guys are just too damn determined. Finally, Boethius tackled the matter of free will and God. Basically, it's a matter of just because God knows the future doesn't mean he forces you to do it. It's the time-old argument of just because the sun rises doesn't mean you cause it. Or the idea that just because an idiot will be elected in office doesn't mean that I voted for him. In conclusion, Boethius says don't rely on becoming a celebrity or winning the state lottery because both suck beyond your wildest dreams, and instead find a way to become a virtuous badass instead, which is pretty good advice except that most people are lazy as all hell. Everyone wanted to and still wants to get wealth and power quickly. So while he seemed to be spot on in terms of fortune, we're probably not going to hail Boethius as the one philosopher to save us all, at least not anytime soon. However, there is still hope. Perhaps we might find one in the future or somewhere in history. Spoilers, no we won't.